Hey, what's going on, guys? So, welcome back. Embarrassing story. I was actually streaming on time, but I didn't realize that I didn't actually hit the go live button. So, I definitely apologize for that. It seems like the stream is up and running good now, and I'm hoping that you guys can see me and hear me properly. So, just still learning. This is a learning process for me. I probably should have did a little bit more to test my stream before I started, but it is what it is. So I'll go back and do the recap because I literally did it, but the stream is pretty messed up. So okay, let's recap. We started with our Express. This is what we use to create routers to direct our traffic through the web. So if we have our endpoints that we'll dive into in a second, those endpoints are really just where these are endpoints that we create. So if you go to like www.williamennals.com slash, that slash is now creating an endpoint that once you reach it, you're making a request from a server or a database. And that's pretty much what we've created in these routers through over here. So go back to index.js. In order to connect to those routers, we first had to make our brain here, this index.js file, which is this is home base. This had to be aware of our database that we created over here. And to create the database, it wasn't a very complex process, and you see how easy it was to create this database. So, and this is actually hosted on the website for Mongoose, or depending on if you want to go to the source, you can go to MongoDB and create the data and use the native MongoDB scripts to connect with the database and manipulate it. But I like Mongoose because it makes it a whole lot easier. It probably will help you in terms of a deeper understanding to go in and look through Mongoose, but to be honest, I haven't even done that, and you see how well it's working out for me. So it's not a requirement, but it can definitely give you a lot more understanding if you were to go in and at least look at it. You don't necessarily have to use it in a project, but you can at least look at it and say, okay, what is MongoDB? How is this language set up? What are the kind of the ins and outs? So that way, when you go and do projects, you know exactly what's happening under the scene. Well, I should say under the hood. So each one of these is a router that we've created, and we'll review those in a second. This right here actually is kind of like the power on button. So it literally creates our application. So this is how we're able to go here and say, hey, now that we have our app, we wanted to use JSON. And JSON is those JavaScript object notation that we talked about, which is just a way of structuring data so that way you can pass it back and forth in a consistent format. And again, here we have these routers. We're telling it, hey, use this router, use that router. So this is like registering a router with Express to say, okay, now it knows how to direct traffic when it gets to these points. Otherwise, you would make the request and it would have no idea how to deliver the information. And then down here, only thing we did here is we're telling the app to listen to traffic on this port. And this port will change once we go live, which is why we created this constant for it. And I'll show you guys how we're going to interact with this variable here and how we're going to get it. And but for now, we're just going to work with this port 3000, which is pretty much a default for Node.js. So let's review our models. I'm going to go over this really quickly just because I've already done it in previous videos. So if some of this stuff goes over your head, just go ahead and look at the previous videos, starting with with part 1, and that'll tell you, you'll see literally everything I've done so far. So start with that and then work your way up, and then by the time you get here, it'll be cake. It'll be pretty easy. You'll know what's going on, and you can just pick up. So this is where we created our model, and this just shows the structure of the data that we're going to be working with and storing in our database. And we did a project for, we did a model for our post. We have a model for projects, and we have a model for our users. So this is all we really had to do to get the database up and going, at least for the functionality that we're going to be using. And then down in the routers is where we just create more. This is more advanced. This is where we're actually saying, hey, this is the data we're going to pass, this is the data we're going to receive, and this is how we're going to work with our data, creating it, retrieving it, updating that data, and deleting the data. So this is all that we need here. So that's all that we really had to do here. Now there is a few changes that I'm going to make. I said that before, but I just want to keep reiterating that one for myself so I don't forget, because my mind tends to work faster than my body. So we have our projects router, which is pretty much of the same structure as you can see. We have two different ways to retrieve it. We can retrieve individual projects, or we can just retrieve all of the projects. And same thing with updating. You have to specify which project you're going to update. And then down here we have our user. So the user is going to be really, really powerful, because this is where we're going to spend most of our focus. Reason being, for the user, we want to be able to say, we want to be able to control, based off users, who's going to be able to access the website, the database, and make these requests. And for this specific use case, usually with a lot of other websites, the requests will look a little different, and they'll want more security around getting information. For instance, if you're creating some kind of, maybe let's say you have a video website, like say Netflix, for instance, right? You only want to give people access to videos that they have subscriptions for. And same thing with Amazon Video. There's access to regular videos, where the videos that are just there by default, and then there's certain movies on there or TV shows on there that you have to purchase. So there has to be a way for them to securely deliver that information to a user. So and that's what we're going to go over now. So right now we just created our users, so we can create users, we can get users, we can update them, and we can delete them. But the thing is, I'm going to create this website, and I need a way to log in, because okay, now that it knows the database will know there's users that have access to it, but it doesn't know who has the right, the privilege to go in and create this and create posts. So what I'm going to do now is going to be a little bit of what you call authentication. So I need to be authorized and authenticated. So the authentication is saying I know who you are. The authorization is saying this is what you can do. So let's go ahead and dive into that. So the first thing that we're going to have to do with the authentication is actually a few things. And starting with the terminal, we're going to have to install some things. And the first one being something called bcrypt. And what bcrypt does is, actually this is a more security thing. So right now, when we look at our users, so let me go ahead and fire up Postman so you guys can see. And again, if this stuff is going over your head, just go back and check the previous videos starting from the beginning, and you'll get exposed to all of these different software applications. And Postman is really powerful in this process, because you get to see in real time how your data is being passed and delivered without having to create the website fully. So as we dive in here into Postman, and it actually saved our previous session, as you can see. So right now, what we need to do is, I want to go to the user stuff. So here we go, we have our admin, right? So right now, when you pick an admin user and you retrieve something from admin, oh, I'm sorry, I forgot to run the server. So right now, I'm going to say npm run dev, and this is our development environment. So that's really important to kind of distinguish between code that you running when you're just testing, and then the code that you actually have when your code is live on the internet for other people to interact with. Let me make sure. Okay, maybe I hit that a little too early. There we go. So it's finally picking up. So maybe the user I was trying to retrieve doesn't exist anymore. And this is fine. I'll just go ahead and try to create it again, as long as it doesn't already exist. So here we go. We have our first user, right? But the problem here is that you see we're getting our password back. And that what that means is that creates a problem, because if somebody comes into our database and hacks our database, and they'll be able to go in and get a user password. And granted, it's probably only going to be me in the database, but I don't want to expose myself because my email is going to be wired up to this thing. So I don't want to go in. I don't want anybody to come in and grab my password, because if they're able to get my password, most people use the same password across a multitude of different websites. So if you get exposed through my website, then you're more than likely to get hacked again in other places, because they already have your password. So and then they have your email, so they can always just test, you know, a bunch of different sites with your email and password until they get in. So you don't want to do that. So what we're going to do is we're going to hide this password, and you'll see how we do that over here. So I'm going to stop the server now, and then we're going to install something called Decrypt, and that's what we're going to use to encrypt our passwords, if I can spell. So now I'm going to go up, open this up. It's open, but I need to create a new window. So I'm going to actually go to npm bcrypt, and I'll show you guys what bcrypt is, and this is pretty much where we're pulling it from. So this is the home screen, and you can see this is a fairly popular module that people use. 426,000 downloads, and this is weekly, so it's not like, you know, this is total. This is weekly downloads. So you can see there's a fair amount of activity on that thing. And what we need to do is grab this here. So grabbing this is how we're going to install it. So I already have that typed below, so let's just hit enter. And now it is installing, and then it'll be available for us to use. So the thing we want to do is we want to encrypt our password before we send that off. So let that download, and then we'll dive into that a little bit more. Taking a little longer. Let's see. Rebuild binaries. Hit error, connection closed. So I either had a network issue while that was trying to download, or actually it seems like they had some depreciation issues. So I'm going to try this one more time, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to do @latest. So to try to pull out the latest version that is available for that. And hopefully this can clear that up. Yep, so it seems like I have some stuff that is out of, that's not up to date. So what I need to do is go back here and correct that. Let's see, let me see, I'm trying to find the actual final line down here. So what they wanted to do, they wanted to get 1.07. So let me go back to the actual module and figure out what is going on here. Because the most recent version is 4.01. So it seems like there's some disconnect. So what I'm going to do is try this again. This is actually something. Node.jit only works with stable release versions of Node. Use Node.jit to build and install a stable version of Node. Okay, so was I seeing that in my terminal? So you look down in here, and we're kind of seeing something like that with this gypped thing. So I think that's what they're telling us that we have to do here. They say no gypped. So let me look into this node JIP thing, and we'll fix that. So this is really how developers fix problems in real time. You kind of hit an error, and then you just use your resources, Stack Exchange, things like that to get around it. So I'm just gonna Google that and figure out what this is, and then hopefully there's a new thing here. So there's pretty much, it seems like my node JIP is out of date. So actually there's a npm update script that you can do. So you can do npm update, and that'll update all of the dependencies that we've downloaded so far. And I really just want to update everything. So let me try that. And I don't really remember these off the top of my head. I just know that they're available and that I can get them by Googling. So it seems like it's already doing something by updating a lot of stuff. And let's see, it updated Mongoose. So it seems like my Mongoose was out of date, but that's not really what I was looking for. So what I'm going to try to do is, I'm going to try to do it bcrypt one more time, but I'm going to change the version. So when we looked at the site, we did 4.0, and let me go back to the internet. It was 4.01. So that's the latest version. So trying to get that. Okay, so now it seems like I'm really not going to be able to get around that error. So now I have to do npm install node jipt. I think that's what it is. And that's a package that was giving me a problem. So I'm going to pull this now because I think it was telling me I had 1.1. See, here you go. Here, this is node JIP, and I don't really know what it is. So let's see what it is. Node JIP is a cross-platform command line tool written in Node.js for compiling native add-on modules for Node.js, which is the bcrypt. So that's an add-on. It contains a fork of the JIP project that was previously used by the Chromium team, extended to support the development of Node.js native add-ons. So this is it. It's just a build. So it builds the bcrypt stuff that we want to let us use it. So what we'll have to do is we'll just go ahead here. We'll copy this, and we should be good to go. Hopefully. This stuff is pretty. It can get pretty deep depending on what you're trying to build and what you're trying to use. But again, you can already see that some of this stuff is depreciated. So what that means is it's just not supported anymore. But it seems like I was able to get that installed anyway. So now if I try to go back and install bcrypt, hopefully that fixes my problem. And it doesn't seem to be the case. So I'm really having a problem with this here. Yeah, it's still failing. So let's go, actually, oh, I see. So node pre-jipt install fallback to build. So I'm going to Google this to make sure this is what it's trying to tell me to do. And yeah, it's kind of a back and forth battle, just fighting with the code, trying to figure out what stuff means, and eventually you get what you need. Hey babe, can you hit the light for me?
One second.
Okay. Yeah, sorry guys, this is a little dark, so I'm going to go ahead and hit the light. So actually, here we go. Here, there's an issue on GitHub of people discussing this thing. So this is what we're seeing here. So I'm just going to jump down to the bottom to see if this was actually resolved. It seems like it's an open issue. Maybe oh, here we go. So let's try request, and like I said, this is pretty much how this thing goes. You just do npm install request, because it seemed like that was the real problem there. But before I start installing stuff, I try to make sure that that's not what I need. And hopefully this fixes it. There we go. So I don't know why the Creative Cloud just started, but that's fine. So now we're going to go back to bcrypt and try to get that thing up and going. It still seems like it's not supported. Actually, there's a few things in here that I might need to update in order for this to work. But let's see if we're getting a different error this time. And it seems like, let's see here, operation not permitted. Actually, I'm not familiar with any of these error codes. The operation was rejected by your operating system. It's not possible. Already in use, or that you lack permissions to edit it. So that's not true because I obviously have permissions. So what I want to do is, I'm looking at these depreciations because this seems like all of these, oh wait, so you see here that these modules are actually moved. So so I'm pretty much going to have to go through this list here and download these and create these installs. So I'm going to start with Hawk. I don't even know what this is, but it seems like I need that for the project. So I'm going to do Happy Hawk. And actually, I'm going to just Google this to make sure I can get this. So since I'm in the terminal, I'm on Windows, so I have to do Control-Shift-C to copy stuff out, and then I'll go over here and drop that in there. So and right here, this is the npm for that, and I can just do it that way. So I can do npm install, and I'll do at Hawk. What is it? Hawk slash Happy Hawk. Okay. Happy slash Hawk, and get that. So now it seems like I'm not getting any problems. So now I'm getting that, and then now I have to do the same thing. I have to go through and go to, actually, what's happening here? Actually, before I go through that whole list, I just want to go back to the bcrypt scripts to make sure I didn't miss anything here, because it should have been a pretty straightforward install, because I've had it before, but some other things are happening in here. So I just want to make sure that I didn't miss any updates or something like that to the package itself that might affect the way it's being installed. But it doesn't appear to be the case. And actually, there might be a problem here, because what I went for is I want there's actually two versions of this. There's bcrypt and there's bcrypt.js, and that could have really been the problem. So this bcrypt.js is actually more popular, and you can see this is JavaScript with 0 dependencies. So that was my problem. And again, this is a really good learning exercise for anybody else that wants to be a developer. Is that you have to be very specific about the stuff that you're trying to get into your code. And here is all the dependencies for my package. And this tells me that if anybody wants to use my code, for instance, when it's on the internet, it's saying it depends on all of this stuff, and it tells you exactly which version that your code is dependent on. So that's really good, because say you have a problem, say with your website, it shuts down, it stops working, and you're like, hey, I don't know what's going on. And as you saw in the terminal here, some stuff gets depreciated. So as technology and these new advancements come with languages and things like that, certain things change. So you have to make sure that your code is up to date with these changes, at least in the scope of these dependencies here. So now I'm going to do this again, and what it's actually going to be is going to npm install bcrypt.js, and that should actually fix our problem. And as you see here, there we go. So that was the biggest issue there. I forgot about the dependencies. So now we're going to go back to our, let's see, I think it's the user router. Actually, I'm going to just close all these open files and save. Actually, I don't want to save. I'm just going to say no, because I made changes to this while it was open. The change was in there, so if I tried to save it as the way it would have overwritten what I was trying to do. So now when you go back in here, you'll see that bcrypt is in here, and I actually don't want this in there. So let me take that out, and I want to take this request out because I didn't actually need those. And the reason that was because bcrypt is actually written in C++, so that's another programming language. But the version that we wanted was bcrypt.js, which is for JavaScript. So as you see here, it has 0 dependencies. The other one had too many dependencies, and this is the actual one that the original one was the one that had the fewer downloads. So this is a lot more popular than the original one. So that's cool, at least for us. So now when we go back to our user router, we want to create something to modify this password and encrypt it, so that way when you send your password back to the user, the password isn't shown. Well, the password isn't shown as a password. So what we're going to do is we're going to go back into the model actually, and what we have to do is this is going to be a multi-step process. So the first thing we're going to have to do is turn this model document right here. This is consistent of, as you can see here, that when you do create the model, you actually give it a name and you use this thing called a schema. And I'm pointing like you can see what I'm pointing to. There's this thing called a schema that we actually put in as an object. And so that's what all of this here is. This is defining a schema. So in order to do what we're trying to do, we have to split this out, and we're going to say, here we go, it's, we're going to say user schema, and we're going to say that equals a new schema. Actually, I think we have to import schema from Mongoose, so it'll be mongoose.schema. And that's this right here. And I can actually store schema in another variable because we're going to use that a little bit more. So it can just be mongoose.schema. And in reality, when we pass that object in anyway, it gets converted to a schema anyway. So the only thing we really have to do is cut this and paste it into that schema. And you'll see in a second why we're doing this, because what's going to happen is we're going to jump down into this user now, and we're going to split this out into, say, hey, you're going to use user schema. So now we have that. But now we want to do some things with the schema. We want to do something to it before we send information back. And what we want to do is, this is where we're going to set up bcrypt to modify our password. And in order to do that, we first have to go up in here, and we're going to get bcrypt into our code. So we're going to say, we're going to do bcrypt equals require. And since we already have it installed, we can just say bcrypt.js. Right? So there we go. We have bcrypt in our code. So now, when we want to go ahead and convert it, we're going to use some methods on bcrypt to do the conversion of our password. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to come in here on just below where we've created the schema, and we're going to say user schema dot pre, and this pre is where we want to go to say, hey, before we save this user, we want to do something, and we'll see that in just a second. So I'm actually just taking a glance at my notes to make sure that I am on track, because this is something that I've learned once and used it once, but I haven't used it again after that. So I just want to verify that I'm up to speed. Never hated my notes so much until now. Here we go. Yep, here we go. So now we want to use pre, because that's before we save it into our database. So just to give you a kind of idea of what I mean is, you see here we define our user, we create the user, and then we say, hey, existing user. Well, before we get there, right here, right? We have user.save. We don't want to save it to our database like this. So what we have to do is we do user.pre, and that gets us here. And you see here, right? We tell it what method we want to do it before, and we want to do it before the save method. So we can literally go in here and say save. And then we do a comma, and we have to use a function. So in this particular case, we have to use the you actually have to use the actual use the normal function and not the ES6 function, this arrow function that you guys see me using so much. Pretty much this kind of format here. And the reason being is because there's a concept called this binding. And this binding is I really can't explain it. It's really just saying, hey, I want to use this specific instance of something before I use this specific instance. It's literally that, this specific instance. The instance that you're currently referring to when you go into this code. So now that we're in here, we want to say, hey, you want to store the user as something, because now we're saying the user is going to equal this, right? You see what I mean? And just think about this, you're saving something, right? So this is before you save it. So we're saying this is the information that is coming in right before this save method, right? So now that we have that, we want to go in and say, hey, this, so what you want to do is we want to hash the password. So we're going to say, okay, const password equals this. Well, actually, we have user now, so we want to say password equals user dot, and you see here we have some stuff that we can get out of it. And the only thing we really want is we want user dot password. Actually, that's not what we want. We want to use bcrypt. Right, and there's a method on here called hash. So you want to bcrypt dot hash, and now we want to send in. You see here, there is the thing we want to hash, and hashing is just a kind of encryption method that translates your data. So now we want to say, we want to take our password, so we'll say user dot password dot to string, I believe, and it has to be a string format there. So you see that, so that's why we have to convert. We have to take our password and convert it to a string, and then right in here we want to run this hashing algorithm. So this salt, when it says salt, it's really just think about it, the number of rounds of times that this algorithm is going to be applied to whatever you put into it in order to make the encryption. And that's really as far as I understand. And this number 8 here is kind of a recommended value for security and processing speed. So now we're taking the password that we put in there, and now we're going to change it. So and actually I forgot to pass in here this next thing. So this next thing is actually, it's what allows our code to go from this block back to the save operation. Otherwise it would literally just stay in here and it would never process all the way back. And I'll go ahead and show you guys that that's what happens. So when I save it, I won't put that next in there. So now that we've gotten that in there, we're going to say, all right, so now we're going to say user dot password equals password, this password that we just created. And what I'll do is I'll call this hashed password, so that way you guys can see that this is what's happening. So we'll say user dot password equals hashed password. So now that works. And then again, I told you for this go around, I'm not going to say next, because I want you guys to see that this is in fact going to give us a problem. npm run dev. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go over here back to Postman, and I am going to create a user. And actually I can't create the same user, so I'm going to change that, and that should do it. Let me see what my limitations are in terms of creating duplicates. When this user routers are here, it says if there's no user with this email, you're good to go. So we're good to go. So now when I send that off again, actually it should have gotten an error, but I'll worry about that in a second. So we've created our user, and actually we're running back in here. So what did I miss? Oh, I see. So the user is already. Could have sworn I had this thing in here because I never passed next. So I think I'm a little disconnected. So let me glance back at my notes and get this thing going. So we have mongoose.model. So, and we change that to be that there, and then we defined our user schema dot pre, and we said pre-save. So before it was saved, there should have been some kind of error. So I'm actually going to try to find this one more time just to make sure I didn't run over anything. So there's actually a few things going wrong here, and I'm not even catching it because I've sworn I had this thing going yesterday, well, Friday, that I was error-free for the most part and good to go. So I'm going to connect to the database, and I just want to take a look to see if that stuff actually got in there. So I'm going to look here at the users table, and it is in fact up. I'm not seeing it over here on this side, on the database side, so there could be something going on here, because when we refresh this thing, we're not seeing anything. So that's already a red flag that something's not working correctly. So let's go ahead and look back at this and see where our error is and what we can do to fix it. So I'm actually moving a little faster than normal, but that is all fine. If I'm moving a little too fast, you can drop me a line here in the chat, and I'll just say greetings so that you guys know the chat is up and working. Hey guys, feel free to drop a line here. So there you go there. You have the chat up and running, so feel free to reach out. And yeah, so actually that's actually a pretty good tool there. So if I'm going too fast, you can actually reach out and let me know that I'm moving a little too fast, and have me go back. So what I'm thinking is that this pre is not working. And I probably missed a line going into pre, because we have the user schema defined here, and I don't see that being a problem. So let me go a little deeper into this to say, nope, I'm not seeing the problem there. New mongoose.schema. Let me take that out, because I didn't even use that schema that I created. So new mongoose.schema, and then we have. So actually, let me try to save this file, and just make sure that that wasn't actually creating any problems. Creating that constant. So I'm getting a little confused about how this thing is actually set up now. User.save. I'm actually going to take this out too. So I'm trying to create the user. Actually, I'll leave it there for a second. Oh, I see. Let me take this out. Actually, nope. There's an existing user. We're going to throw the conflict, and then we're going to jump out. Next is into quite a few issues here with the database and with our model. So this is really just what you call middleware. So I'm going to jump into the documentation for middleware through models. And I'm going to go to the docs. So in the docs, we're going to go to the middleware section and try to figure out what's going on. So we want to use this pre-hook. And just as before, when I described it, we use this dot. We use the schema here. We called in our schema.pre. We set the save method, and now we're creating our function. For some reason, it's still shooting through to save the user even before we call this next. So right now, I just want to figure out why that is able to happen. Oh, and I believe it's because is this thing here, await. I never made this an async function. So what actually happened was, because I didn't do that, the code never waited for anything, and it probably just executed and just took it as it didn't matter. So that's one thing there that I didn't do. So now this is actually going to wait for me to do this stuff. And then the next thing is, while I'm in here looking, I also want to make sure that this gets called. So I'm going to do a console log in here, and I'm going to say console.log, and then say pre-save. So I want to make sure that this thing runs, right? So I'm just going to run this thing again and see what happens. So it's still saying it was created, and we are in fact jumping in here. So we know that this isn't the problem. So next thing is we're going to say, okay, now that we're in here, how are you able to do this, right, and still send that password back without encrypting it? Because as you can see here, this password is still the same exact password that was happening before. So I'm going to actually save this thing. And there we go. Now we're getting something different. And this is probably because the user already exists. And just to make sure that that's not happening, let me change that. And I'm going to send it again. So at least we know I got something working again. But again, this thing should be looping. It shouldn't even be able to do this. So another problem that I'm finding just kind of as I go through this is on the router itself. That so at least I know my email validation is working, and however, I'm not exactly getting some of the error message that I expected to get. So for instance, this 409 here, right? I don't. Before I was getting some other error, and what I really think that error was just the 400 error that we're getting is, I think it's actually what's happening here. I think that the code is actually getting tired of waiting. So let me try to put this in here now and see what happens. Change it. So now I'm going to say this is 4th email. And nope, still not happening. So let's see here. I'm actually gonna pull up a course that I was using, and I'm gonna take a quick look there just to validate what's going on. And this is probably a good time to promote said course. So I'll go ahead and show you guys what course that I use for this, and I don't think you'll get the audio for this, but you should at least be able to hear my
I to install
commentaries. And
password. To get started, we need a plan at our application.
I want to jump through all of this.
Next
I already
password.
know what's happening here. And again, is this it? No, this is still on the index.js file.
Provided is not a match
So,
when compared Boolean truth
Let me see if I can jump
credentials.
down to
Now
the
that we've
end. Oh, still not there. Jump a little further.
sure
and
that it gets
get
applied
it here.
to talk about next.
So, again, this is where we are, and I've already gotten that lined up. So let's go deeper into this video. That's not what I'm looking for. I'm not sure. I can't remember the exact timestamp for this thing, so just bear with me. So, I see. So you see here.
For bcrypt. So up above, let's get later on. We'll fix that. Like Andrew, the thing over with plain text passwords.
So he actually already jumped out of there. So pretty much, actually I have the same code. So again, you have your user schema .pre. We're saving it the sync function. Pass that next variable in so that we can get to the next part of our code. And then we need to say, hey, the user is this. And then we're going to say if the user is modified, which means that if you change the password, which happens actually a few times, it happens when you change the, when you create the user, and it also happens when you update. So when you use that patch, that thing fires. So that is really what happens there, and I didn't say what is modified. So is modified if the password is modified, then we're going to throw, then we're going to do this. And that's where we kind of save the hash password there. And I'm sorry, I'm looking for the video here.
Text
And,
value. Now with this in place.
Oh, I see what I did. So what I did, I tried to do it down here, to try to just stretch it out. But I could have done it right in here. So I could have said user.password here equals that. So it's setting it up directly there and storing it, and I won't have anything else to worry about. So let's try it this way, and I'll go back over here and make sure there's no problem, because actually that is supposed to send that. There's not supposed to be a not there, and then we're going to send the user back. So those changes, I'm going to save that and go back, and when I go to Postman, I should be okay. So now I'm getting the error that I was supposed to get here with the 409 conflict. And when I go back in here and change this 4 to a 5, the password should be a hashed version of the password now. What the heck? So I'm really getting a little baffled here about what's going on, because on this post, I shouldn't have to have changed anything on this to get this to run. So I'm going to go back and
the only other thing we need to change in this file is to import bcrypt. So up above.
Actually, did I import bcrypt? Actually, I believe what I did. So I actually have bcrypt imported. So I wonder if that's.
Let's get that done before saving and running it. A new constant, bcrypt equals. We'll use require, grabbing the bcrypt.js npm module. Now we can actually test things out and make sure the password is getting hashed. Equals, we'll use require, grabbing the bcrypt.js npm module. Now we can actually test.
Same way that you see there. So there's not a difference in that. Maybe
things out and.
There's this thing here with their method. Actually, let me modify my validation here, because I know here I forgot something to throw that in there, to throw a new error instead of just the way that I was doing it before. I believe that was kind of creating some issues for me before. So if I was to remove this, that clears up that. I take this comma out of there. And actually, I don't think I need that one either. This comma should go here now. I don't think I even need that try block either. So yeah, this was actually pretty screwed up in terms of the validation that I had. So now we've got something going outside. Okay, so let's try this, and we'll rerun that. So conflict. Funny thing is, we should actually be getting an error that the email is invalid. So actually that might have been what I was getting before one time. Let's see if I do something like this and see what happens. But again, the password is still coming back as the password that we created, which it's not.
bcrypt equals, we'll use require, robo3 tier, but I'll need password. I'll be heading over to create.
When I see this here, it's just, the weird thing is that the object that we get back is the hashed version of the password. So all this time I was thinking that it wasn't working, but it's working in the database, which is very, very odd. I have no explanation for this. I have no explanation for this. It's supposed to show here in this response object. So I don't even know what to tell you. I want to do another thing though. I want to see if I take this ad out, if I at least get that 400 that I'm supposed to get. And I'm not even getting that. So I really need to look into this router here. And I want to pull this stuff out of here to just figure out what exactly is going on. Because this just shouldn't be happening. Let's see here. And there should be some validation being done on this user. In terms of, when I create this user,
The user and Mongoose gets
there should be at least
over
some
to the
kind
up,
of
try to
validation
before
to say,
create message.
if this user
Now
exists
it's
already, it should
as the
you shouldn't
passing
put this
an
in here.
object in as.
But I'm trying to just go back to this video for reference, because from what I've seen, what I did so far
Here we just
is
passed that the
working.
updates onto the
It's
task
not working.
dot for each.
And that's the part that has me baffled, because it shouldn't be a big deal. And as you see here, there's not any discrepancy between their code and my code. And actually, I'm looking at their patch method and not their post method, which is also bothering me, because it should be in here. Oh,
Version
I remember.
2.
So since I did this, I actually needed to clear out the database. So let me go here and just drop this database and do it again. I can't remember exactly why this is the case, but that was an issue. So you see the problem, right? And then now when I go back and try to do this, I'm going to do it without the email as well. And well, validation isn't working, so that's one thing. So we go here again and we go through, and I put that ad in there. That works, but the password is still displaying differently between the two. Alright, I'm utterly confused. I'm just going to save that. Oh, wait, here we go. This is something that I was looking for here. So I did get an error, but I didn't handle it. So what I need to do is figure out how to. So the way I had it wired up before seemed to actually work. And my only issue with that was that I didn't have a way to handle this thing. So this is actually one of the errors I had back in my previous videos. Because it did fail validation, right? But for some reason it was still created. And that is my problem. So, things here are showing, actually, I don't even know how that collection showed up. Here, you see what I mean? Like the encryption that we created is literally right here. But when I send it back through Postman, it's not picking that up. So I'm going to close Postman out and relaunch it. because I don't know where the disconnect is. I don't know if the disconnect is me, maybe I missed something, or if the disconnect is that you know, I screwed something in my code and things started to break. And another thing that I want to say is I want to come back into my code and say, I believe I'm supposed to send this user back with a new password, but that's not registering with me right now because it's already being passed
Update
back
the properties that are actually being changed.
when I change it. So again,
Update
we'll go in here,
a call
and we'll see.
hash the password, but only
So,
under the following
I'll change this so
condition
that you guys
if
can
the
hear.
user has
Actually, it's
a
gonna-
modified
I'll put
password
the
property.
subtitles on.
User
So,
dot
right here,
is
we're
modified
saying
is the
if the
method
user
we
is
can
modified,
use,
we're gonna
and
change
we
it.
pass in the name of the
If the
field we're
password
looking
is
for.
made,
In this case,
we'll
we're
change
looking
it.
to see
And then I'm
first
gonna
create
fast
one of
forward
the
just a
things
bit.
changed. Hash into
And
hash.
there we go.
I have that on
User.password
user.password,
equals that. So that's where
and
we
the second
created
is the
in
number
so
of
that's where we're
rounds, and
hashing
once
it.
again,
that's
I'll
where
use
we're
8.
hashing it
So here we're
here,
taking the plain
but
text
I never
password
actually
and
sent
hashing
that
it,
back
then
as
using
the
that hash
response
value
object.
to override the
So,
plain text
I
value.
wonder if that's what's happening. So I overrode. So here is where you override.
Now
the
with
plain
this in
text
place,
value.
the only other thing we need to change in this file is to import bcrypt. So up above, let's
So,
get that done
I
before
already have
saving and
bcrypt
running it.
imported,
A new constant,
and I have the
bcrypt
validator.
equals, we'll use require, grabbing the bcrypt.js npm module. Now we can actually
So,
test things out and make sure the password is getting hashed.
Here we go. Here.
So over inside of Robo3T, in the users collection, I have a few different users,
thing
all with plain
is coming
text
back.
passwords. Let's create a fifth one right
So
here.
Here, it's working for this guy. So I just think there might be something different between the different versionings of software, because I did just go ahead and upgrade Mongoose. So that could have changed anything. You know, I have no idea what that changed. So when I go ahead to create this user, let me just want to try this one more time. That when I create it, this password definitely should be changing. So I'm gonna have to do a little research on that and figure out why this is happening, because when I look in the database, you can see that that's definitely not the case. The password is not the same password that we're seeing. What I'm thinking is that there's some because the user that's coming back here is different from the user that is being passed through here, that may be a reason for some discrepancy. Reason being is that you can obviously see here that the user object is this user object. So it's saying, hey, we're going to save it and then we're going to send back the same user. And that in itself could be the problem. However, since I modified it, it shouldn't be a problem there. It shouldn't even be in the same. It shouldn't. The object should have changed with it. So I'm gonna keep checking this video.
We'll be heading over to create
figure
user.
out
There's
why
the
that is
bcrypt
happening.
in this file
Because
text
as you can see here, there's nobody changed. It didn't get sent back.
value. Now with this around JS,
So,
let's create 2.0. Later on, we'll
definitely do a
fix
little bit
that,
of
locking
looking
down
into
the
that.
password even more. Well, go ahead and we ran that
So,
make the value that thing password hash to the. Now currently we're not using any middleware
So
for
you see
task,
here.
so we'll be doing the same thing here that we did for user. So your goal is to change how to make sure that middleware actually runs. So we'll be doing the same thing here that we did for user. So your goal is we're not using any middleware for work through. Your job is going to be to make a change to the task router. We have to
See what I
is
mean?
alter the
It's
logic we use.
literally the
So
same
your
thing.
goal is to change how tasks are updated. Step 1, instead of using find by ID and update, you will first find the task, then you'll use for each or user. 2 is alter the logic we use for updating it. Now currently we're not using any middle. A quick challenge I'd like you.
So this is literally the end state, at least from the way I learned it. So this is a problem that we're gonna fix here live, because trying to follow that is gonna screw me up. So just using what I understand is here. First thing I'm going to clean up is this response object that I got from my error. So the only thing I need to do is I need to first say, hey, if, for back to the validator, because this is the one that bothers me, I need to say, I'm going to put that try catch back in here. So try catch E, and then we're going to say, actually the weird thing here is I want to look at the Mongoose docs, because I really don't understand this very well, to be quite honest, because when I created the schema and I had my custom validation, let's see, down here I think, since I have my custom validator, I'm just going to do custom validation. Here. So since we have that validator, my problem is, wait, where's the custom validation? Let me see, custom. I'm just type custom to see what happens. I'm gonna put custom valid because I don't know if it's validation or validator. Validating. Overwriting. So these docs really aren't the best documentation, and as you see here, I can't even find what I'm looking for. So I'm gonna go over here. Actually, they have a whole thing for validation. So here we go here. So now I'm gonna click on custom validators, and in here they have this thing. And for some reason, I guess, when you do this, you get your return, and this return is actually going to be a true or false thing. So I have to open up into these docs to get to the next level. And I'm going here, and this is the function, right? And so if it's true, it succeeds. If it's false or throws an error, it fails, right? So in our case, this here is going to throw an error. An error. So down in here, we know that this is you have an optional message that you can return. So here, if function should return the error message as a string, and then this is a props parameter, and this is if true, it'll pass the validator properties as the second arg to the validator function. And I don't really understand that, and I don't really need it, I don't think. So I'm going to try not to use that. And it seems like this is the example that we get. So we already have a function for this, but if we go here and we say validate, and it has the validator right here. So this is the function, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to copy that. I'm going to say validate, and I actually screwed up already because seeing that I already kind of see what I did wrong. So I'm going to here, and I'm going to fix this validate. So it's going to say validators, that the validators that we imported, so validator dot is, oh, I see that, I see what I did that. Validator, and I'm going to validate this function. So it's all in here. So that's the difference here. And the only thing I need to change here is I need to return. Actually, I can just go in here and take all this out and just say, there's this end, and we're going to return Actually, I'm going to leave this as a function. So validate is the whole function, and we're going to return validator dot is email. I believe is how it's written. Yeah. And actually, we need to say if it is an email, it passes. And if it's not, so this is what we're returning here. And then the rest of this comes out. And again, I'm testing this as I go, so I could be wrong here. So we got this, and then if we want to add in an error message, it seems like we just add that in with the object. So what that means is in here, it seems kind of weird to do it like this. So I kind of want to do it the way they described it up here. I don't want to create that function outside of the schema, just because I don't like having a lot of moving parts, but I might not have an option. So what I'll do is I'll say validate, and then I'll just create the function right in here. Function, right? So now you see the way it's written now. And now, if I want to say, comma, let me see if I do this. In here, got the function in here. And I actually need this here to make this code work. So we have the validate there, and then now I go here with comma, and I can say you see what's happening here. It's a little complex. I'm probably making this more complicated than it has to be, but you know, when you don't really understand it and the docs don't give you a lot of documentation, it's a little difficult to do this. And this is some templates for the error messages. So you have your validate, and in my case, we did have a function to return something, and it seems like you can just return your message right up in here. So that's what I want to do. Except it seems like I can just do a comma right after that. So I'm going to take this out and put the comma right after that, and I'll put message here. So return v.length less than 5, comma, message, and then this is where I'll put in my string method. I'll say invalid email. And that's what I'm going to do for this particular part, just to see if this works. If this works, then I'll have some progress. So I'm going to take this out again, and I'm going to try that one more time. And as you see, it's still taking it. Very odd behavior. I didn't even have to duplicates. So I really don't know where I dropped the ball here in this user router, because it shouldn't be this complex. You know, we're not getting our error message, we're not getting, you know, activity as it should. I really want to reload this page. Let me just save it. It seems like the best way to kind of get this thing to reset. Nope, see, look at that. Every time it's going right through. So working with this and splitting it out seems like, it almost seems like this is what caused the error, but that's definitely not it. So I'm going to put that thing there. So because with the way the doc says that if it returns false, let me actually try this. I'll create a function outside of this. Const function, const validate email, right? I'll do that. I'll follow it exactly to the T. And see what happens. And it'll just say return this. And it probably doesn't even have to be a function at this point. See, this is all it really has to be. Actually, it is a function, so it'll do something like this. We'll say value, and we're going to use the ES6 functionality. So that's it. This is all we have to write. And we have to say return. I don't think I have to write that either. So now when I go in here, I can just say validate email, right? So we're calling that. And then when I go in here, seems like they're going, so you create the object that is your validator, which is going to be this. So I'm saying const validate email is going to be this object. It's going to hold the function in the first parameter, and then the second parameter is going to be the error message. If I can do that. Doesn't seem to be the case. So I'll leave that alone, and I'll just say const validate email function or object. I'll say email validator. How about that? Email validator equals an object that's going to be validate validator. Is it? So, actually that might have been an issue too, because I put validate as opposed to validator. Because if I use one of those built-in validators, built-in validation, you just typed in, I think it was supposed to be bacon, required true. Where's another validator in here? And actually I might be saved because I can put this unique property on here as well. Because we only want one email in here anyway. So that might be actually how I fix a lot of these things. So now I'm going to just change this, and it's going to be validator. Let's see here. Go back to the docs. And we'll go back to the custom validator. So yeah, validate, and you pass that object here. So it's an object that has this. Oh, I see. Okay. So it'll be validate. It'll be the object. We have validate email. So I'll do validator. And I don't like the concept of creating an email function, but I'll leave it in there for now. Actually, no, I'm not. I'm gonna take that right on out. So it's going to be validator, and I'm just going to copy this function that we created here, and I'm going to pass that in directly. let's see, validator. I'm going to pass this in directly right here. So I'm going to get rid of both of these. And I'm going to say validator, there we go, and then comma, and then a comma there, and then this should be the message part. Yep, so it should say message, yes, and this is going to be here, and it's going to say invalid email. So if that thing is false, it should give you an invalid email. And then close that. So hopefully that fixes the thing with the email. So let's try this again. Let's see if I say 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it. So the whole time we've been getting errors, but that thing has not been worried about it. So it seems like it's out of sync with the documentation, because this thing isn't throwing any errors. This thing isn't throwing any errors. So it seems like we have to handle the errors that we're throwing. But that's the part that I can't see because I don't see it in the docs. And they say if we go here into the options here, these don't tell me anything. So they're saying we're creating an object here that's either a regex expression, a function, or an object. And but there's no example. Validator. But again, that I don't see anything saying. So this is literally what we have right here. We have our function and we have our message, and it still doesn't pick up on it. So this is a tricky one. I'm just gonna go back and make sure I don't have any issues like a typo or something. So jump on the validator property that is supposed to be available to us. So you drop, let me see, because this validator here is a property, and we're saying we're validating this stuff right here. We used an arrow function, and I don't think that is important. And the reason, we don't have to use a return statement because it's a one-liner. So that's that. And actually, another thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to go here and take this part right here and try to do my Google search again. I know the last time I said I kind of just omitted it, but I probably should have dug into it a little bit more, and that probably would have saved us a little bit of the pain in the ass that we're doing right now. But I'm going to try to keep going with this thing. And here we go. So path username required password. So that's their code. Got past that. So you look at the schema. They got the same thing we kind of had. Slightly different. And this isn't the answer we're looking for. Actually, none of those are what we're looking for. So this is back in 2016. I try to always, when I'm doing code stuff, I try to keep my results to a recent timeline. But that doesn't always work for me. See, like in this case here, basically got the same thing going on. And actually this solution doesn't even have a check next to it, so I'm not even gonna waste my time. This one looks, let me see here, what is the exact message that I'm getting? So this is actually, it's kind of funny here. This is actually what I want, but handling this promise is the problem. This error originated either by throwing inside of an insane function without a catch block, or by rejecting a promise which was not handled with a catch. So this thing here is supposed to be throwing so I'm just going to stretch this out again. So if I go back in here and we have this thing, we take all this extra stuff out here, right, and we go back to what we had. What I'll have to do is I'll have to do a try like I had before, and then after the try I add my catch block. But the thing is that before, when I tried to pass all this in, it fails. So I should be able to just return this, right? I should be able to just go, okay, here, return that. And if it's a and if this doesn't work, it should jump me down into here. And then what I should be doing is going, okay, that doesn't work, so now I have to catch it and handle it somehow. I want to send a message back to the user, and it should be handling it there. The problem is that I don't know exactly how to do that. So I may be able to go in here, but because I don't have access to the response. I don't have access to anything. So the only thing I can do is say return e.message, right? That's the only thing I can think of. I don't even know if you can even get this. So I'm gonna send that out, and it didn't like that. Actually, I'm missing something. Where is this? Line 30. So those match up. Seems like I'm missing a closing parenthesis somewhere. But I don't see where. They're saying it should be a comma, but there definitely shouldn't be. Ah, I see the email. So there should be one more here. There we go. So now if I save that, well actually, so now we're running. So now if I go back into Postman and fire this thing off, the only thing that changed is the ID. But we're not getting that email error. So the only thing here is because we don't have a response, so I can't just go ahead and say, oh yeah, change the response. So in this catch block, I did handle it. So let's see if I change this to that. And go back into Postman and send that off again. Still not working. So this validation is still giving us some problems. I'm going to just do this and say if validator.isEmail. So actually if, because this should return true or false. So if we have any problems here, we're going to throw manually a new error, and that error is going to be called invalid email. And actually, I think that's probably what my problem was here. So I can't remember the type of this thing. So I'm actually just going to say we're just going to return E, and whatever error that is. This could be a hit or miss. So it's still not getting back there, and I'm probably sure that my terminal, it's not yelling. So I'm not sure what's going on. Unhandled promise, reject. So here we're not getting any problems, but it definitely should be giving us a problem. So it's like, hey, what is going on? So just to make that a little bit, updated. See here, we're not getting any problems, but let's check our database. It's allowing these entries into the database, and we have no idea why. So I'm going to go ahead and drop this thing again, because something is definitely not right here. So, unique, required true. We're trying this validation. We caught it. If the thing failed, if the email is invalid, we threw our error, but the problem is getting that message back. So let's try to, if I use it as a property, try to set that back. Actually, what I want to do, I just want to console log it. And just to make sure, let me see if I do console log E, and then I'll see from here what's actually going on. So I'm going to send this thing off, and then I'm going to go back over here and look at the terminal. So I'm getting that. So what if I just did E dot message? Let's see what prints out. So it's still telling us so now we get the actual invalid email, but it's telling us we're still getting unhandled promise rejection. And we don't have a way of handling this kind of stuff. So we go here, we go back to the, I want to see the, go here, we type in email, because I'm not sure what's going on here, because this stuff is usually pretty straightforward, and I'm not handling it, and that's really the problem. The problem is in the handling, and when it says handling these things, the docs don't tell you how to handle this stuff. They, I have my catch block for catching these things, and it's still giving me a problem. So, I even had the message for it. So, it's doing this. So, let's see, customer is going to be asynchronous if we return to an AC function, also if we promise to settle, if the return promise rejects. So, I think what I need to do is say, I'm going to look back at the Validator documentations as well, because that might give me a little bit more information about what's going on there. Validator JS. I don't think I needed that JS on there. I think I just needed Validator. Validator. And want to see what kind of object is coming back. Is email. Absence is an object which defaults to allow display name, require display name false, blah blah blah. Oh, that's interesting. So this is all the validation that I can get, but I want to know a little bit more about what makes it throw the error, because I want some documentation on this. So I'm going to go to the home page. So as you see here, returning Boolean. So that's why we had to force it to throw an error. And then when it threw the error, we got the error body down in here. So now when we send it back, we need to do something with how we send this back. Because when I try to, if it's unhandled, we're getting an issue. So the S error originated either by throwing unhandled promise rejections are depreciated. So let me try this. We're going to copy this thing, and because this is really the problem, the unhandled thing. So we need to figure out how to handle this in Mongo or Mongoose. If the assertion fails with an error, this error will cause the never to get called as the code error out before it. Unhandled. Promise rejection is caused when it fails assertion because the error. Because if an error is thrown in catch handler and there is a subsequent catch handler, the error will get swallowed. In general, if you want to test the promise, it's code. This is not what I'm looking for. Let's say Mongoose. Here we go. So here I can't read this. This is the promise they're using to connect, and this is their router. Trying to find this thing, and they're executing the function. There's an error, and print that out, otherwise we return a response to JSON and send it back. So the issue here is that we're getting that message, but we're handling our error as soon as we throw it. We're sending that error back. So maybe it doesn't like that, and we'll just say this. Or let's say send or something. No, this catch block is really all we needed to do this. I mean, realistically, unless I'm missing something else here. So I'll change the email again, and then send that, and then again, you see how this is turning out. It's printing out, but it's not fixing our problem. So, try to return this instead. To say that we're actually returning an error. So let's see if I return this error. I kind of know that this is a little bit redundant, but I really just want to see what this is doing, because I want this error to stop what's happening over here. So what if I just return the error object? As opposed to the message itself. So I figure like it's kind of bypassing everything I'm saying about this database in the email, and it's jumping in there, and that's really not cool. So things are getting pretty tricky here today. Kind of a bad way to start the week, but we found out that we had some bugs in here, and that's really finding a bug is really a learning opportunity. I know, at least for me, it's kind of like a little embarrassing. Say, hey, I'm showing you guys how to build a website, and then I run into all of these problems. But in my opinion, having these problems is really a good thing, because problems are opportunities for growth, and there's never too much to do as a developer. So I'm just gonna go ahead and cut this here today, just because I don't know how long it's gonna take me to get to the bottom of this. If I catch this at a decent time, then I'll just go ahead and reboot and kind of look and walk through it. Otherwise, I'll see you guys tomorrow at 8 o'clock, and we'll get this thing resolved. So until then, see you tomorrow. And again, go ahead and check out the other videos and get yourself caught up on what's been covered so far. That way you can see what's going on, how things have been working, and then tomorrow hopefully I'll have the solution. So take care.